Namaskar. May 5th, 2021, episode number 156 of Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri. In US news, let's first look at some economic news. Janet Yellen predicts a modest rate rise to prevent economy overheating, Treasury to borrow $463 billion in Q2. Actuals are $401 billion in 2021 Q1 and $597 billion in 2020 Q4. The total projected debt for 2021 is $2.28 trillion. The US trade deficit surges to $74.4 billion and the trade deficit with China rose 11.6%. Your thoughts, sir?
My thoughts are that Mr. Jerome Powell was waiting for his former boss to give indication that they can lift the interest rates because of the runaway economy. We have given the numbers in terms of what the markets indices are pointing to. So she's now saying that it's inevitable that there will be a rate rise with more and more money being put into the economy. The fact that the Treasury is now indicating that it is going to borrow $463 billion in Q2 versus the original projection of $95 billion is the effect of this infrastructure plan spend that is kicking in. And then with the outer layers is at least going to factor in the $1.8 trillion of the child rescue plan or the child welfare plan that is contemplated. We don't know what the numbers would look like for the climate accord that is being also contemplated. In summary, we are looking at a $2.28 trillion addition to the debt on a balance sheet, which is $3.6 trillion in revenues and close to $4.4 trillion on expenses.
And in other news, Biden seen with President Carter with no mask, and Chauvin juror number 52, Brandon Mitchell, who attended pre-trial rally, may jeopardize the guilty verdict. Rasmussen Poll finds that over 52% question Biden's ability to manage terror, and Biden tax hikes and high debt pathway to recession are a $4 trillion budget and a $6 trillion spending plan. Sir, your thoughts on what is happening in and around Biden, no masks while meeting with the esteemed President Jimmy Carter and his wife, sir?
Yeah, just before I transition, I didn't respond to, we had a $200 billion exports and $274.4 billion imports, predominantly because this is excess cash that's been given to consumers. The spend has increased. Usually the spend is around the lower priced items, and vast number of this is imported. That is the reason why you have seen the trade deficit, breaking out. Needless to say, China continues to be the number one. There was contraction in the Mexico, but the deficit has grown by 11.6%. Now, in terms of the specific questions that you have asked to transition to the general news, Biden he masks when he is on what you call Zoom calls, and mask is off when he is in person. So the Twitteratis were all over the place projecting, he is a president who critiqued that President Trump was not wearing masks, President Trump was going around and causing more harm, but he has been totally inconsistent in terms of following through. That is the thing. I don't know whether he is actually creating some harm to some much more elderly President Carter in the process. Possibly he's vaccinated, but that's just the way President Biden is, which is completely absent-minded and totally kind of negligent to the rules. As far as the Chauvin case is concerned, the George Floyd, David Chauvin case is concerned, it's now come to light that the juror number 52 did not disclose that he participated in a rally last year, which could put the whole case to risk. Already, there has been some comments coming from the jurors that they were scared and afraid that their life could be under threat if in any way they make a judgment which is counter to the sentiments that was prevalent at that point of time. Already, the David Chauvin's lawyer has filed a restraining order citing this specific instance. It'll be interesting to see what happens. As far as the Rasmussen poll is concerned, with the withdrawal of the Afghan forces and everybody clamoring as to what is going to happen on two fronts. One is security, and second is the terrorist threat. And the second is the surge in border, where they have now stopped reporting the news that there has been a number of potential national security, people who were in the wanted register coming through, who are a threat to the national security. So the poll was effectively validating where people think Biden is. It's astonishing. Only 30% of the people think he has the capability. More than 52% think he is not, or he is not at all capable in terms of managing the terror. As far as the Biden tax hikes are concerned, everybody is now coming on board, from market analysts to everybody, that this is a runaway wreck in terms of a looming recession looming recession, plus a complete blowout of our budget and the ability to, anytime in near future, come close to reducing the debt or converging on the deficit. We're not going to reduce the debt. It's only the deficit, whether you can bridge the deficit, because the interest costs are going to be very high. The other important point in this, which is also causing some alarm in the analysis that we were doing yesterday, is many people are now complaining that there's a significant labor shortage, that people are refusing to come to work because they got a convenient paycheck coming home and there is no willingness. So the question, therefore, is the unemployment numbers that is being proclaimed based on unemployment insurance or the actual employment in the market? And what constitutes employment? Because if you recall, under the PPE program, money does flow into the system through small business, but many of the businesses have no ability to control these people coming to work. But they have signed down to an agreement where they will not let these people go, at least 90%, depending on 2020, 2030, or 2025, as the case may be. So whether these numbers are getting fudged in terms of unemployment, because I spoke with people across four different states, four different cities, Minneapolis. I spoke with people in Washington, D.C. I also spoke with some of the people in Atlanta. I also spoke with some of the people in LA. And the general impression is that it's very difficult to get people to come to work when they are comforted by money coming right into their bank account.
And in India-related news, Bengal burns while PM Modi and HM Amit Shah go to sleep. So that's a strong observation. Yes, indeed, we have not heard a single word from the Prime Minister or the Home Minister. And I think this centralization of power only leads one to believe that they are responsible, even though it might be that the central administration cannot really go down to the state to administer law, because law and order is a state subject. So your thoughts?
Now, my thoughts are, uh, I have a feeling if Amit Shah is the prime minister of the country, contrary to Prime Minister Modi, I'm very provocative here, but I'll make my statement. If Amit Shah is, or Yogi is the prime minister of India, or even Nitin Gadkari, we would have seen far more forceful actions coming out without giving any due weightage to what the Supreme Court may say. And ever since the Arunachal Pradesh verdict, which went against Modi in terms of the dissolution of the state and appointment of the CM, he has gone back into the back foot in terms of not doing anything to any state, notwithstanding the fact, what's happening in Bengal. In Bengal, this is not the only thing. We have had that Sharda scam, that the police commissioner running around all over the place and they couldn't do anything. Second, you had that terrorist incident in Kolkata, and Ajit Doval could not send his NIA to investigate because she said she would block. Then there was a law and order issue in a couple of universities. She said she would not allow the CRPF because she thinks that it is part of the state. And then you have the issue of both Amit Shah as well as Prime Minister Modi's plane not being allowed to land, saying security issues. There's a prime minister and the home minister of the nation. So effectively, he has allowed, these two guys have allowed Mamta to rise like a monster. I would say that's the only word you can say. She's rise like a monster, and she has issued a statement which is to say all the visuals are old and fake. And the mainstream media and the Supreme Court of the country. The reason why I keep bringing Supreme Court seems to be in India the governance body. They want to have real-time monitoring systems installed, the software, real-time monitoring software installed on the oxygen cylinders. They want to be in a position to answer what's the vaccines and what's the number of vaccines that is not there. They want to be in a position to answer whether the guys who can riot in Delhi are allowed to riot or not allowed to riot. When you look at the Shaheen Bagh incident when everything was getting burnt, Supreme Court said, oh, rioting and protesting is the right of an individual. So it seems like the Supreme Court has usurped the governance of India, and probably Modi and to some extent Amit Shah, if they have confronted head on, right, they would have tackled these lefties who are prevalent. Just as here in United States, the what you call as the liberals believe the court is heavily tuned in favor of the conservatives. The conservatives in India should kind of say, hey, we have a problem with the judicial system. And but this is the situation that people are getting murdered, people are getting, the buildings are getting burnt. Poor, these are not people of wealth. These are very poor people who are getting bombarded. So these are my observations as far as Bengal, India, and these issues go, sir.
India and the United Kingdom are set to sign an enhanced trade agreement. China is recruiting ethnic Tibetans amid border standoff with India. I think UK and India trade relations one-on-one, bilateral is, I guess, a good thing. Unless you have something to add, I'll move to global news, sir.
No, I think that this the China tactic is effectively basically Tibetans versus Tibetans. I think that's the because the Indo-Tibetan force is a very strong regiment which actually leads the front end in the Ladakh and the greater Himalayan region. So this is a clever strategy that they are trying to adopt to basically play divide and conquer type of game.
And in global news, Biden hopes to meet Putin in his June trip to Europe. G7 ministers aim for complete Korean Peninsula denuclearization. Xi claims ultimate authority and claims the title helmsman like Mao Zedong. And Australia ups the ante against China. Flurry of diplomatic contacts fuel Iran deal. US mediated border talks between Israel and Lebanon resume. And Netanyahu faces a midnight deadline. So what is the deadline Mr. Netanyahu is facing, sir?
He's basically trying to form a coalition. So, with center and right, everybody has ambitions. So the question is whether he can come to a consensus, at least basically say, hey, I'll be the prime minister for 6 months and I'll transition the power to someone else. Now, he has to come up with some kind of a power sharing formula. Naftali Bennett is a big aspirant to be the prime minister of the nation. And Naftali is also, developed some ruffles with Mr. Netanyahu. Well, he was one of the key partners of the prior government, and then there was again a new coalition. He stepped out. He was still active within. He was not the defense minister at that point of time. He's a very powerful figure with his own little faction. He has a sway for Netanyahu to form the government. So this is where Mr. Netanyahu is having a problem.
And in global COVID update, Biden sets July 4th goal of vaccinating 70% of US population. In a Gallup poll, 1.3 billion people from around the world reject COVID vaccine. Russia turns to China to make Sputniks to meet the demand. No more lockdowns and shutdowns. Lessons from COVID. Pfizer seeking expedited approval pathway for roll of its 2-dose mRNA COVID vaccine. Indian COVID numbers are being presented now. And before I do that, sir, your thoughts on the other areas?
The other areas is, I think, the July 4th goal of vaccinating 70%. I think United States is very much on target. This is at least one vaccine. Gallup poll is not a surprise. You're beginning to see that there is tremendous resistance, at least in some segment of the universe. What is surprising here is Russia turning to China to make Sputniks in China, recognizing that China is aspiring to be the vaccine hub and resurrect the vaccine diplomacy. Its own two vaccines have not, at least one of them has not done very effectively. So it's a bit of a we'll see what happens to it. Originally, Sputniks were to be manufactured in India. There was to be a big deal with the Serum Institute until some type of people issued threats, etc., which made Mr. Poonawalla flee to London, make an announcement that he's going to make things out in London, and then now to come back to India again. No more lockdowns and shutdowns. That's a big lesson from United States and countries which are trying to, people who are trying to, go back to the old model. They're going to face the consequences. Even EU has come to the conclusion those who are vaccinated must be, allowed to be brought in. This is unrelated but very related to Pfizer. Pfizer reported earnings, and their first quarter earnings was $3.6 billion. If you recall, we had mentioned what's going to happen to some of these pharma biotech vaccine stocks, 3.6 billion. And we mentioned yesterday 195 billion is the amount of money that's going to be spent on vaccines going up to 2025. So make your own judgment. COVID data of India is, the two important charts. One is yesterday's, and the other one is the May 3rd chart that we put, May 4th chart that we put up at 8 a.m. The objective is to point out that everybody points to two numbers. The two numbers that they point to are the total number of cases and the total number of new cases. What they don't point out is India did have a very high or higher recovery rate. And the second number that they don't project is the net increases in active cases. The net increases in active cases has reduced by close to 25,000. Again, they talk about the number of deaths. The number of deaths naturally will increase when you have, in my view, this double mutant virus that has come in. Based on some of the reports that we are seeing, is how could it have been triggered, whether it was triggered as a biowarfare or whether it was a natural thing. That there is a report that has been published by the State Department of United States, which says that this Wuhan Institute of Technology or the Institute of Virology seems to have a close connection with PLA. Whatever may be the case, the Indian numbers will begin to taper down. That's the general projection. Some people say by mid-May, you will begin to see the tapering of the numbers or plateauing of the numbers. Some people, both are reports, predict based on modeling by first week of June, things will begin to normalize. To prove for that is you need to look at the Maharashtra numbers. When you drill down on some of these things, when you go back in, we only have given the highlights, you will begin to see the evidence of the tapering down. Having said that, the oxygen shortages, vaccine questionable whether we have enough vaccine to vaccinate. The government says they released 176 million vaccines for the month of April, etc., etc. Again, vaccine numbers are given. Quite a significant population has at least received one vaccine in India. So those are my observations on the Indian numbers.
And in markets news, Nasdaq drops 1.9% as Yellen talks of a rate hike. S&P drops 0.67%. The US 10-year Treasury bill is at 1.592%, 30-year at 2.265%. Oil is at 66.13 with Brent at $69.32 a barrel. Bitcoin is at 54,845.1 and coin is at 280.66. Maybe another good entry point for coin. And the Dow Jones 34,113.03, S&P 500 4,164.66 and Nasdaq 13,633.50. With that, we come to an end of today's episode. We'll see you tomorrow bright and early. As always, thank you Sridharji and Namaskar.
Namaskar and have a wonderful day.